Welcome. It's a pleasure. It's always a lot of fun to be in the MBA GMAT club. And so I am happy to be joining you today to be talking about how to use an MBA to pivot or change careers. And this is actually a great time of year to be doing this because for people who are planning ahead and maybe thinking about round one, 2023, you have a lot of time to actually do some of this research and think about things. So with that, I'm going to jump in and just tell you a little bit about me. Some of you may have seen me on other webinars. Stratus has been doing a lot of webinars on GMAT Club over the years. I have my MBA from Kellogg. I've actually spent most of my career in higher education working with people who are in some kind of transition, whether it was the 15 years I did in MBA admissions, or even prior to that, working with undergraduate students in their career planning. So helping people figure out how to tell their story and how to make that next transition is something I really enjoy doing. I enjoyed doing it on the school side, and for the last 8 years, I've been doing it with private clients and really have enjoyed that as well. Stratus, again, a lot of you know about Stratus, so I'm not going to say too much, but the things that set us apart are that we have a team-based approach so that when you work with Stratus, you're not only working with the counselor that you have. So I have clients that I work with directly, but on our team, I would bring in another counselor to be a sounding board for their strategy. And whatever schools people apply to, at the right time, we will bring in either alums of that school or former admissions people or someone who knows the school well to give feedback specific to that school. So if you work with us on 4 schools, you're going to get different feedback from 5 or 6 people. The other thing that is unique about Stratus, and we really put our sort of money where our mouth is, in that if you work with us in round 1 on 4 schools or more, meaning that you're sort of all into this approach, that you believe that this is the best way to go, we will not leave you hanging. And by that, I mean, if you apply to 4 schools and we don't tell you what those schools, will give you opinions, but we're not going to tell you which schools. So you can apply to the top schools. If you're waitlisted or denied in round 1, we will work with you for 2 free schools on round 2. So in other words, we're really trying to make sure that you end up somewhere, and our process is very good. And so actually, rarely actually when I'm working with clients, do we actually even need to use that option, but I think it's just a great option to have. So that's just a little bit about Stratus. But then really what we want to do is talk about this topic of today, which is this career pivot or change. So what we're going to do is we're going to talk about areas that you're evaluated with as a candidate. We're going to talk about what makes a good goals statement. So in other words, what is it that in how you structure that will be most appealing to the schools. And then case studies of people who have made career changes or pivots. And then finally, at the end, if there's any questions about how Stratus can help you, I can answer that. And I am doing my best here to monitor. I've got kind of my eye on the live chat. And so I will do my best. Oh, look, I've got Anir who says, thanks, corporate lawyer here looking to make a switch into strategy, and helping an MBA will make me do that pivot. And actually, I would say that's probably more of a change, and I'll explain that in a minute, but you're in the right place. All right, so areas of evaluation. What this means is no matter what, when you're applying to business school, no matter what the school, on some level, they are all looking at these factors. So I'll kind of go through them one by one and kind of give you a sense of what I'm talking about. So obviously, your academic and quantitative readiness. And in all of these areas, you can think of it as you can get between an A and an F, a failing or whatever. So you want to have as much as possible A's or as close to A's as you can in each of these areas. And that will increase the likelihood that you'll be able to make that pivot or change. So in academics, it's like, think about, did you take classes or were you involved in something in your undergraduate that you could leverage in making that pivot or change? So for example, let's say you were involved in an investment management club in college, but you're now working in consulting, but you want to, you're looking, the fact that you had something in your foundation, something in your academic experience where you were doing investment club in college could be a building block that would help you make that transition to move out of consulting, which is what you were doing, and perhaps the beginnings along with an MBA to get into investment management. So you want to sort of think about what it is in my past, in what I've studied, or in the quantitative, if you're an engineer, you already have a quantitative foundation. And so that's going to make it easier for school to say, you know what, I know that this engineer who has a solid foundation can make a transition into finance. So kind of just thinking about what do you have in your experience that you can build upon. Same thing in work experience. What skills have you built in your work that might prepare you for this new position? Did you work in consulting for healthcare clients and now you want to leverage your healthcare industry knowledge to actually work at a pharmaceutical company? In the case of, and let me see here, the lawyer, into strategy, there may be some things about understanding, the nuances of a particular industry in terms of where you have been a lawyer. And you may be able to, build upon that so that you can get into more of a strategy role, but at least you understand something about the industry. Your leadership and your community involvement. What skills have you built in your extracurricular activities that might be useful to you in making this pivot? If you were involved in maybe social impact consulting and now you want to work at a nonprofit, you can build upon that. So really just think about, it could be something you've in your, some of the things you've done in community service, you have some knowledge about energy as an industry. And you're trying to leverage that knowledge and leadership that you have perhaps outside of work to make a transition into energy. The recommenders are super important in this because they may be able to highlight skills that you have that would be helpful to your, what you want to do next. So your recommender can highlight relevant experience and can actually maybe help AdCom see how you could make a transition. They also could your recommenders can give some insight into why it is that this transition makes sense for you. Obviously, in your goals and your essays, you get a chance to say directly what it is about, what you've seen or what you've been informed to be able to want to make that transition. So certainly your essays and your goals, that the goals that you are writing about in your essays will also really help make that change. I sometimes like to think of it too, like, what's the rocket fuel? So why is it that you are interested in, energy? And it may be something, you studied something in your undergraduate in engineering and, were fascinated with, something you did that you now are wanting to transfer and get back perhaps to, or get to this industry that you care more about. But the building blocks of your foundation in understanding some things about, engineering and understanding how things work could be relevant to the energy industry that you want to go to. So anyway, that's kind of keeping in mind areas of evaluation. Now, what makes a good goals statement? And there's several things about this that we'll talk through. You want to make sure that they're ambitious but achievable. So when someone's looking at your resume, there needs to be some kind of a cookie trail, if you will, to see some thread. If someone says that they're interested in sustainability in some way, it could be helpful to see that they were involved in, some kind of maybe farm to table, food movement, or that they were involved in some kind of, recycling efforts at their company or something. So it's helpful to have some kind of something that makes it believable that this new goal that you have, where did it come from? It came from somewhere. You want to have a short-term goal that is specific. And I have a colleague that I used to work with that talked about specificity equals credibility. So you want to mention the name of a company and a role. So for example, I want to be a product manager at a company like Airbnb, or I want to join a strategy consulting firm like Kearney, Deloitte, or Accenture. And one thing about strategy consulting, obviously MBB comes to mind, and lots of people want to do that. I don't encourage people to just say MBB, because there are so many other consulting firms, and it's not necessarily, it doesn't take you a whole lot of effort to come up with MBB, McKinsey, Bain, BCG. Everybody knows who those companies are. If you were interested in human capital consulting, you might like mentioning Deloitte, mentioning that they have a practice. Or if you are interested, you could mention a firm like Kearney, you could mention Accenture. So you don't necessarily have to, and it's not like you have to put 5 companies into these short-term goals, but be a little bit more creative. And if you know a particular consulting firm has a strong practice, strong retail practice, mention that practice. And even mentioning, for example, the McKinsey retail practice is more, shows that you've done a little bit more research as opposed to just saying McKinsey. A long-term goal, what do you want to do aspirationally? And so, a goal could be lead product development at a consumer-facing retailer, or CFO of a global nonprofit impacting food insecurity. So kind of giving a sense of, what are the kind of challenges that you want to face or the problems you want to solve. Explain what skills you will need in the short term to gain in the short term to be successful in the long run. So a product manager runs a small business within a business. Learning to manage the product in a startup environment can build the skills needed to start your own business someday. What you can do to find these, you can find, job descriptions, do informational interviews, use LinkedIn. Sometimes you can find your doppelganger on LinkedIn, someone who perhaps has had the same kind of background that you had, and they're now doing a role that you want. So you can kind of almost look at how that person has progressed and get a sense of how you can build upon what you've done to be able to also be successful in that. So let me give you some examples. And this is a client that we worked with a few years ago. And this person studied engineering at a, and worked at a top engineering firm. Worked in CPG, focused on improving equipment and facilities of large CPG companies. And she wanted to get an MBA to gain holistic business skills, to grow as a leader, to influence change, and to learn more about strategic planning. She had actually worked in a, of all things, a mayonnaise factory that had not been improved in many years, and was able to make some, significant improvements in sort of working to change manufacturing processes. So in her case, this is maybe a little bit more of a pivot than a change, but she wants to stay in her industry. She wants to stay in CPG. The function is to stay operational, but focusing on owning a longer term strategy. The size is small firm to a large multinational corporation. And in this case, also moving geographies, was in Canada and wants to move into the United States. Side goal also to increase women involved in operations. So she could speak to challenges that she faced as being a woman engineer, and sort of created a process to create sort of a society of women engineers to help women engineers at her company. Same thing in this case, where in wanting to go and be, so her short term is to work as an associate operations manager at a CPG company like P&G or PepsiCo. In the long term, I want to be the COO at a similar firm to address growing operational challenges in the CPG industry, such as sustainable sourcing, waste reduction, and automation. So all of the things that she did as an engineer, and building in the specific stories of, she actually has experience with CPG by working on that engineering side. This is going to really help her be able to hit the ground running and to be able to be in sort of an operations management role within CPG. So again, that's one example. Here's another person that I had as a client several years ago, and he's long graduated from Booth, but his short-term goal was to revolutionize. Well, actually, and it's interesting. So his short-term goal at the time was to revolutionize the payments industry by improving access to affordable financial services for underbanked populations around the world. Wanted to become a product manager at a fintech payments company such as TransferWise. And then the longer-term goal was to leverage my experience in fintech and to join a venture capital firm specializes in financial services related investments. I will be successful in reaching my aspiration because I've developed expertise in financial industry operations, unique challenges that financial institutions face in the payment space, such as anti-money laundering and other regulatory compliance requirements. And here's a case where the school, I think, can sometimes make a really big difference. To make this jump from, working actually in consulting in financial services into venture capital is a big jump. But going to a school like Booth, where you can do you can do pre-MBA internships, and there's internships that you can do in semester. And so he was able to leverage his risk management and financial and payments expertise, and actually do VC internships at Booth. He did some things with the Polsky Center for Private Equity and Venture Capital. He did the New Venture Challenge. They gave him a lot of exposure to startups, and he is now actually, from his MBA, he actually made a full transition where he's been working in venture capital as an associate and makes investments in AI, in cybersecurity, and IT infrastructure, all areas where his pre-MBA background and expertise have been helpful. So again, that's, you can make these big career changes through an MBA, but it's really helpful to pick schools that will have resources to help you. And again, to think about what kind of things I've done in my past that can be transferred over and help me in my future. Then we're going to talk a little bit about, and I've mentioned these words, but I haven't really defined them as such. So I'm going to talk about what is a pivot and a change. So in a lot of examples here, maybe I'll just go back here. I'm going to go back and just maybe talk about them one at a time. The company, even the company, whether it's a small or startup, that could be one lever of change. The geography, again, if you're moving from the Midwest to the South, or you're moving from one country to another country, the big ones that people think about is, am I changing industry, going into different industry, and am I changing function? If you are doing more than two, you're probably talking about a career change. If you're talking about perhaps one, and especially if it's like, I'm changing geography, then that's a pivot. Or if I'm changing just my industry, but I'm doing, then maybe it's a pivot. But when you start saying I'm changing industry and function and perhaps some of these other things, then you're talking a little bit more about a full scale change. And both pivots and changes are possible through an MBA. And again, through really thinking strategically about how you can do that. So examples of a pivot, from New York to San Francisco, so tech industry is very bi-coastal, and maybe you could leverage the fact that you have, tech industry experience on one side of the country going to another. Pivot from a product manager in tech to a product manager in retail or consumer goods, or vice versa. This might mean moving from a product manager role in a small ed tech firm, like a product manager for Google working or to a product manager for Google working at Google Classroom, something like that. Pivot within an industry, within commercial real estate, from sales to a product manager or business development at WeWork. Again, changes would be more, from strategy consulting to banking, where you're changing industry and function. And what you want to think about is what experiences from your existing career, what extracurriculars can you leverage to show that you have some expertise going into the new career. And the more boxes you want to change, the better you need to be at looking at school research and looking at which programs are going to help you do that. And I'm going to give you an example around real estate. So, and to two schools I have some direct exposure to. So, for example, if you want to work in real estate finance and you want to work in the Southeast, and real estate, there are a lot of programs that have great real estate: UCLA, Wharton, Columbia, Kellogg, UNC, Keenan-Flagler. So lots of programs you're looking at. But if you want to do this in the Southeast, you want to find a school that has a lot of electives. So you want to look maybe at what kind of electives are offered in real estate. You also want to look at the career report. So if you want to work in real estate in the Southeast, Keenan-Flagler in the 2022 employment report sent 15% of the class to real estate. And in general, they send quite a good chunk of people to work in the Southeast. So you now know that you're going to a place where there's a lot of people and a lot of opportunities to make that change. Well, and proud Kellogg MBA alum, and excited to be going to my reunion later this year. 2% of people in the most recent employment report were going into real estate. That doesn't mean there's not lots of options that you can't do it, but it might be something, again, to look at those details, when you're making those decisions. So how do you find all this information? You can talk to people in the clubs. So talk to people in real estate clubs at different schools that you're interested in. Find out what are the companies that are big recruiters there. If there's a particular company that you are interested in, and find out where they may have recruiting relationships. And you then, maybe that's part of your reason why you want to go to one particular MBA program over another one. Talking to people in clubs, what courses did they take that they found most useful? What clubs were they joining? What were some of the conferences that were super helpful to help someone make that change? So you can do all of this research, and you now have, at this period of time, lots of time to be able to do the research, so that if you are applying for round 1, 2023, or perhaps some of you on this, again, there's still time. A lot of schools have extended round 3 or even added a round 4 deadline. So you may be able to do some of this research now, or maybe you're still a year or two out, and it gives you, again, things to work on and think about that could be helpful. All right. So I'm going to give you an example again of a change where this person is changing industry and function. So went from finance to marketing, wants to go from trader to product management, a small firm to a large multinational firm, and was open to go anywhere else, anywhere in the United States. So this person actually played lacrosse and went to a large public Ivy, walked on, ended up becoming captain in his senior year. he worked in finance for the last 4 years and wanted to said consulting initially was his goal. But then as he did further digging in, he kind of realized he wanted to sort of leverage some of that athletic experience he had and actually be in an athletic director, sort of be on the university side and the athletic director route, which is, not something, although it's very helpful to have an MBA and be an athletic director because you're managing big business, big budgets, big broadcasting contracts. So it can be helpful. But what he kind of realized is that to get to that longer term aspirational goal of working as an athletic director, one thing he could do from his MBA is to work for a company that in a product management, brand management role that has very strong relationships with universities around sports. So think Nike. So I want to be a brand manager at a consumer-focused company like Nike to build skills of running a brand where I hope to grow to manage a portfolio of brands. My long-term goal is to combine my passion for sports and brand management to be an athletic director at a large university managing a portfolio of sports teams. So this is where someone understands that, I want to do this longer term goal, but in the short term, there are some things at a university where, targeting a school like Nike makes sense for me. So then, in looking at schools that he was looking at, he ended up going to Ross, but, UCLA Anderson, very strong athletic brand. Stanford, UNC, Chapel Hill with basketball, Duke with their basketball. So it really helps, if you go, and again, great school, but Booth, Chicago isn't necessarily a place that has, it itself is running this sort of, $1 billion athletic brand. It's not, the perennial in the NCAA football championships or basketball or things like that. So again, if you have this goal and you know that you want to make the switch, going to a school like Michigan Ross can make a lot of sense. I remember when we toured, I'm a member of something called the Association of International Graduate Admissions Consultants. It's AGAC. And we always have these industry conferences in the summer. Sadly, for the last 3 years with COVID, we had to do them virtually. But in one of the conferences right before COVID, we visited Michigan Ross. And it tells you something about the school when you visit, so there were admissions consultants meeting with the school admissions team from all over the world. And they did a tour for us at the end of the session. And we actually toured their football, the big house. We toured their stadium. We got to go in the locker room, see, Tom Brady's stuff in the locker room. So that football is a big deal at Michigan, and sports is a big deal at Michigan. So again, if you have that goal to want to transition, it makes sense to look at schools where they can help you. I'm seeing a question. I have more than 5 years of experience and would be a problem to get admission in a 1-year MBA program. So I'm not sure if I'm saying this name right, Pooja. Actually, sometimes having a little bit more than average work experience. So for example, and I'm thinking about Kellogg's 1-year MBA program. If you are looking to be in a career accelerator, so if you're going to go into a 1-year MBA program, you really should be an accelerator or an enhancer and not so much of a changer, because in a 1-year program, you don't have time to get the internship. You don't have time to maybe spend as much time getting involved in clubs and building skills. So you could be a very good candidate, perhaps for a Kellogg 1-year MBA program, for example, if you were sponsored by your company and you wanted to enhance your leadership skills, or perhaps learn a little bit more about data analytics or something, and then go back into perhaps an accelerated role where you could leverage, the leadership that you gained. So that definitely helps. Could be a good fit. But again, if you want to do something that is a change, sometimes a 2-year MBA program is going to help you do that more, because you get the internship in the summer. I also see another question. My son is 37. Is it possible to secure and admit at a top tier business school for full-time MBA and pivot geography, industry, real job? I will say, first of all, I'm not sure. I would say if your son is 37, your job is done. So I'm not sure you should be let him steer the ship. And if he wants to get an MBA, are there 37-year-olds in MBA programs? Absolutely. Is that the average? No, it's not. Now, European MBA programs skew a little bit higher in age and experience. So that could be a possibility. Also, there are many people who are in executive MBA programs who are that age, but there are still some people who are, full-time, want to go into the full immersion MBA program, who are that age. And I would say in that case, you just have to be, and in some cases, maybe making a career change makes sense to do that. But if you're someone who is very advanced in your field and you're just accelerating, it may be that you're actually not going to be happy with the outcomes from an MBA program because you're probably already higher or farther along in your career and it would be a step back. So those are all things to think about. I'm happy to see all these questions coming. And so I'm going to kind of keep my eye on the questions and also keep my eye on advancing our presentation. Let me see. How are the agent experiences? So how are U.S. business schools looking for I don't know that U.S. business schools are looking for 37-year-olds, but is in the history of, Harvard, has there been someone who's 37? Yes. Has there been someone who's gone through, and I know from Keenan Flagler, have there been 37-year-olds in the full-time MBA program? Absolutely. But are more of the 37-year-olds in their executive or weekend program? Yes. So you would be a bit of an outlier. And the other thought, I actually just worked with a guy just last year who was in his 30s, mid 30s, and he was looking at, and he ended up actually in Booth's executive MBA program, and he's very happy there. But he also did look at Sloan Fellows. So that's a program where you are, more advanced in your career and you actually do a full year immersion, but you're going to have classmates more your age, or Stanford MSX comes to mind. So if you are someone who's wanting to do that transition, you might find a full-time program where you're all in, but the cohort is slightly different, more closer to your peers. And then naval officer transitioning into the corporate world, graduate in engineering and strong in analytics, spent the last 10 years entirely different field. Any specific advice? I will say, actually, this reminds me, the naval officer story reminds me of something at Keenan Flagler, where we had a naval officer who did not have great GMAT scores. And he went to one of these, presentation events, which thankfully those are happening again, and made a really good impression on the dean, actually, in just conversation. And so we got a note from the dean saying, we want you to interview this guy, even though probably he might not have gotten an interview had he just not made this impression on the dean in the networking event. And he had, first of all, you don't see that many people applying to U.S. MBA programs with, sort of military background. And there was a lot of leadership and skills that were learned that makes the Indian pool then more diverse for a school to say they're not all engineers and they've all gone through tech in some way. So this person actually being a naval officer helped them with different kinds of leadership, made a good impression, and actually was able to make a successful transition into tech, working in a strategy role in Amazon. So absolutely, you can do that. I think maybe highlight your leadership, highlight your decision-making under pressure, those kinds of things. And, again, I saw someone who directly had under 700 GMAT get into UNC Keenan Flagler. Actually ended up going to a different MBA program, but I do remember we accepted him. And then I kept up with him, and I remember he's seeing that he excelled, and he's now at Amazon and may now have switched, but made this successful transition to tech. Okay, let me, before I take any more questions, I'm going to give you this example. So again, this is someone I worked with who was very young, actually, going to apply to business school. She only had 2 years of work experience. She was a biology major in undergrad. She worked in a biotech firm in a customer success role. So she sort of had some customer and, sort of customer service and startup and biotech experience. She wanted to pivot to work in product management and biotech. And her short-term goal was product management at a firm like Genentech. With only 2 years of experience, she needed an MBA program to help her gain more experience, do a deep dive in healthcare, and gain further leadership. Fuqua has this health sector management certificate. So she got more exposure to healthcare from that. In the week of opening, you actually have a whole week where you get introduced to healthcare employers. She did so FCCP, and was able to get, healthcare experience working on a marketing project. She was able to make a successful pivot. What she ended up doing actually, though, was working for a healthcare consulting firm first, post MBA, in a role where Genentech was a client of that consulting firm. So she did get exposure. Then she went on and actually took a forecasting role at another. So she built some finance skills at another pharma company. And now she actually is in a senior strategy role at Genentech. So again, being able to find a program that was going to give her, jump speed, get some industry experience, get some experiential learning, and make a nice transition and a nice career change, even coming in with only 2 years of work experience. So that's, an example. Again, it's really important. And that's where, don't just look at these ratings of schools and saying, oh, well, this week, whatever the du jour school, is. So for example, Wharton, I think in one of the latest rankings, maybe didn't do as well. Listen, Wharton is a good program, a great program, still has a lot of things. If you're interested in entrepreneurship, they have this Tangent Hall where it's a collaboration space. That's not going away. They have great resources in fintech. They have excellent resources, with healthcare management that you can do a major in. So, don't just say you like the school because it's a certain number. Dig deeper to know what kinds of experiential learning opportunities they have, what kinds of things that could help you. And let that drive your decision and not simply just, it's a good school. All right. So where we are, I think I'm doing pretty good on timing, and I think I'm going to have some extra time for questions. I'm going to go through how Stratus can help you. And again, this is on our website if you want to go further, but we have counselors that, can help you. We have 30-minute free consultations. These are some of the services we offer. Application fundamentals is more like if you just want to have someone work with you on your strategy documents, but you're going to apply on your own. We have the whole comprehensive consulting that I mentioned. We also do hourly. We have interview prep for people who just want that. We do ding analysis. If you are not getting the news you want in round 1 or round 2, it will help you figure out what we see. And again, we have people on our team that were former admissions people. MBA Early Edge is for those people who are thinking ahead and are maybe a year or 2 out. It'll help you build, experience and help you build that bridge to figure out where you are and where you want to be and where you want to go and how you can get there. The links here, and I think I'll leave this on this slide, but then I'm going to look for the chat and see if there are other questions from people. But anybody who wants to do a free consultation, you can either, scan that code or just go to that site, sign up for a consultation. You can find time on my schedule or any of the other Stratus consultants, find time. There's our email if you want to reach out. And then you can look at our website and our blog page. We are always doing webinars and having articles. You can sign up for our newsletters. We're doing one in March on what you can be doing now to prepare for fall 2023 deadlines. It seems like it's a long way away, but actually right prior to this, I just had my kickoff call with one of my clients who's applying round 1 2023, which means that people are, to do the introspection and again, to think about maybe what kinds of doing the research on different careers that you might want to do and do some exploration so that you go into business school as prepared, and thoughtful, because once you get into business school, it's just another hamster wheel. You're very busy. So it's good to do some thinking ahead of time. So anyway, this webinar that we're doing on March 23rd, and you can register from our website or you can get the QR link from there, will just help you think about, what you can be doing now to be ready for 2023 deadlines. Let's see. I am seeing some other questions. So Chicago transplant, working in accounting and finance, interested in pivoting to M&A, consulting, or corporate development at my employer, applying to Booth and Kellogg MBA. Actually, I think that those are great options for you, right? And again, think about in your work in accounting and finance, where have you perhaps in finance role supported corporate development? Maybe go to lunch or have a Zoom chat. But if the environment is finally that we can be together, seek out talking to someone in corporate development and ask them, and they know, what skills do you need? Maybe ask them for a position description. What skills do you need to build through your MBA so that you can make that transition? Again, I think that in your case, making that pivot, the either executive or weekend evening MBA programs at Kellogg or Booth, especially since you're in the Midwest, could make a lot of sense. So I think you're on the right track. Then I've got a question from someone that says GMAT or GRE. I would say, here's the thing. Schools are saying, and we have to, take them at their word. Admissions people, if you ask them, they will tell you really they don't care. They want to see the best one. And I think the test where you can be the best at being maybe above average for what the test scores are. So, on GMAT, and, it's funny, a lot of programs have 700, 710, 720. I believe there was actually just an article. Didn't have a chance to read it yet, but I scanned something about grade or GMAT inflation at MBA programs. And that's because, a school puts out their GMAT average and only, 70% or 65% of the class actually took the GMAT. So that means it's a good guess that all the other people weren't getting 710s or 730s. So the actual true GMAT average of people in a program is going to be less than whatever they say the average is. But if you can get a great GMAT score, I say that's the sort of gold standard. That's the most popular. That's the most people in class do take the GMAT. So I'd say take the GMAT. If you can't get above what the school is saying is their average stated, then I'd say look at some other tests. Maybe the GRE is a test where you can do better than the average. If you can do better on the GRE, then do that. And the other thing is, I don't recommend that people send their scores sort of just blindly to school. So yes, it's a little cheaper if you have your scores sent, but maybe you don't want to send your GMAT score to a school if you tanked your GMAT and you only want them to see your GRE score. So maybe you wait and send the scores yourself to the schools once you know which one you want them to see. But again, you can do the GRE. If for some reason the GRE also doesn't work, there are many schools that take the executive assessment. Columbia, Columbia, NYU Stern, Darden, Fuqua, I think Sloan, not 100% sure, but I think they do. But you can look on the site for the executive assessment and see which schools take it. But there are a lot of schools that will take it. So if you can get better than the average on a executive assessment and the school takes that, maybe that's what you should do. So you really have options, and sometimes it takes a little bit of time. You want, at the end of the day, what the schools want to see is that you can do the work. They don't want to admit people who can't do the work. So again, then if your test scores aren't the place where you can show them that you can do the work, Maybe you do something like take MBA math to show them that you are trying to get up to speed on the things you'll need to thrive in an MBA program. Or maybe you take some extra quant courses, or you highlight how well you did in, business courses in undergrad if you've taken them, or you have you're working, in finance or in banking, and you do a lot of sort of, MBA type work, and you're whiz on Excel, and you do macros, and you do all kinds of pivot tables and things. Then let your recommenders share that. Let somewhere in your application, the school needs to know that you're going to be able to thrive in the program, in a quantitative program. Okay, so let's see. So that's answers. Hopefully that answers the GMAT, GRE, or other. It's really whatever one puts you in the best light. Please, for someone coming from a non-traditional background in Africa, energy, how do I hit the ground running, especially wanting to go into consulting, given it starts really quickly? And if you want to leverage your, energy background in consulting, that might be a way to make the pivot into consulting. Thinking about the any kind of strategy or analysis understanding you have from the energy industry, how that can translate into consulting. Again, looking for MBA programs that have some kind of, at UNC Keenan Flagler, they called it STAR, Students Together Achieving Results. Consulting projects. Most MBA programs have some kind of consulting projects that you can get, experience in consulting while you're in your MBA program. So I think that's important. So that those would be some thoughts for you there. Want sure tips to ace the GMAT in the shortest possible time. Join our special. There's a broadcast with Magoosh. It sounds like in 40 minutes. So that's something. How do we know the school average for executive assessment? Well, that's a great question, AA. And honestly, they don't really publish their executive assessment good scores or average scores. And take this with a grain of salt, but in conversations here and there, I have been told that having an executive assessment score of maybe 155 plus would be pretty good. So I would say, maybe shoot for something close to that. Again, I would say the executive assessment is not the go-to number one, but if you're not getting it from the GMAT or the GRE, that is another way to show the schools. And there are schools that are taking them for full time. So you just have to look at the executive assessment website and see which schools are taking them. Let's see. Is GMAT score enough for taking top B school? Well, no, a good, what is the GMAT score is enough for taking a top B school? I've seen all kinds of things. I mean, I've been in this space for more than 20 years. I have a former client who had a, barely breaking over, 300. And that is generally, I would say, a minimum threshold for something like the GRE, barely breaking over 300 and still getting into some top 20 business schools with scholarships. I had a client who had 710, Indian male, got into Wharton, which is certainly not something that happens, all the time. Or one client who had like a 670 GMAT and got, scholarship at Fuqua. So there's no absolute, you're not getting, kicked out because your GMAT score is too low. I mean, there's obviously some thresholds, and if you can stay in that 80% that they put in there on the website of whatever test it is, that's a good thing. But if something is under, something else has to be over. So in the case of one of my clients who had a very low GPA, like under 3.0 and a bit under that. But what did this person have? Exceptional leadership, exceptional like diversity in terms of experiences, cross-cultural exposure, really. So exceptional work progression, exceptional extracurriculars, really, truly one of the best leadership profiles I've ever seen. So if those things come through, a school is willing to sometimes, be okay with the fact that your GMAT score isn't, the top GMAT score. So you really just want to present your strengths and let's call these, I call them the big three pillars: your GMAT or GRE or test scores, your GPA, your academics, and your work experience. Okay. If you want to get into any of these top programs, 2 out of 3 should be above the bar. And maybe you dipped on, maybe you had you just took a while to find yourself in college and you were too involved and you learned how to manage your time. And so you have a 3.0 or a 2.9 in your GPA, but you have a 750 GMAT score and you have been promoted 4 times in your company and you are really, have measurable and, meaningful impact, working in your company. There are going to be MBA programs that are interested in you, and there could be top MBA programs that are interested in you. So don't throw away this idea that you have to be perfect to even apply. Let the schools decide. You will not get into a school if you don't apply. Obviously, don't live in fantasy land and hedge your bets. So if you are applying to a school where you're clearly below the average, I think you could still give it a try. But then if you really want to go to business school the next year, also make sure you apply to some programs where you have a better likelihood, where you're more in range. But, I've seen all kinds of things happen. I've seen people, and I've seen people get into Harvard, not get into Stanford, or vice versa, get into, there's all kinds of things. So you just never know how you are going to be viewed at one particular school or what they might be looking at. So I never want to tell people not to, go for their dreams or try for things, but, go at it with a strategy and a plan and, have some, and if your goal is, I only want to go to this one school and you don't get in and you're okay with working, and if you don't get in, then that's okay. But really have these conversations with yourself, but don't just apply to one school that's perhaps out of reach if you really want to go to business school. And sometimes applying to more than one school can help you because it gives you some leverage in discussing, if you have a scholarship offer at one similar school and you didn't get that offer at the school you really want, having that other offer could be helpful to you in perhaps getting the other school that you want to match their offer. And not like buying a car, you have to be very nice. It's not like these schools are going to, approach it well, thinking that you deserve money from them just because another school gave you money. That's not the case. But if they really like you and they see that you have these other options, and you won't have them if you don't apply, it could actually help. I have seen clients get as much as like $50,000 more in a scholarship because they had another offer for more and they were able to work that through. Let's see, a couple other questions. Should I use the employment report when looking at the schools, especially as an international student looking to transition? Absolutely. Yes. And is there any significance between T20 schools for consulting? Honestly, I think every MBA program is going to have a good pathway to a lot of consulting firms. You might look at if there's certain firms that you want to really have a better chance at. It's funny because it works both ways. On the one hand, I used to say, like, MBB would pull up at Kellogg. They pull up with like a, backhoe, like a big buckets. Lots of people at M7 schools are going into these top tier consulting firms. At the same time, you're competing against a very high caliber student population to get, so it's not just like it's competing against your classmates to get these offers. Whereas if you go to a school that maybe is, more in the top 15 to 20, yes, they're still going to have these MBB firms coming, but I call it, they recruit with more dessert forks. Like they're plucking, 1 or 2 people a year and they're not taking the volume. However, if you really stand out in that environment and you're the rock star person, maybe you are the one who gets that offer. So there's a lot of things. There's more than one way to get anywhere. And I'd say wherever you do go, make the most of the resources there to, get into consulting and make that transition. And certainly consulting is something that all business schools are sending people to. So I don't think it matters so much. Lastly, for someone preparing for UNC interview, do I have special advice on how to crush it? Yes. So for UNC, do your homework. They want to know that you want to be there. They want to know how you can, how you're going to engage. How are the resources of the school going to help you reach your goal? So reach out to students. They have ambassador pages. Reach out to students in clubs, and in your interview, mention specific conversations you've had with people, specific. Envision how might you be able to contribute to the Keenan Flagler community. So how can you maybe had a conversation with someone in a club, and you can think about next year I could host, or I could help host, be in a leadership planning role on a healthcare conference or on an energy conference or something. And again, specificity equals credibility. So show the school that you took the time to get to know them and know why their resources are helpful to you. So I think that, and smile, that's also a big thing. Smile, and don't act like you're at the dentist. This is your chance to get to know them better. So enjoy it. Let's see, how many years of work experience is enough? Again, you can look at class profiles, but class profiles will tell you that 4 to 5 years is pretty typical. Absolutely, there are people who are have gone out of the gates and done well, and I've seen good things happen to people who had just 2 years of work experience going into an MBA. I've also seen great things happen for people with 8 to 9 years going into an MBA program. So I think it's when you're ready, and you're ready to make that commitment, and you feel like you understand why you want the MBA. And that's not exactly the same for everybody. Someone from Africa, what is a good GRE to build upon? A range could be fine. Just curious, how pivotal can MBA math to override a low GPA GRE? Okay, so on GRE, I would say, if in terms of and again, a good score could be different by region. But if you are in the 160, so 320 plus is really a great place to be. Anything over, if I'm saying a floor of 300, then great. 320, somewhere in between, the better. Let's see. So that would be my range. Maybe even 155 plus if in each subsection. And how pivotal can MBA math? It just, one thing it shows is self-awareness to do something like an MBA math, because it says, hey, I understand this is not my strength, and I'm showing you I'm taking steps even before I get there to be as ready as I can for that. And here are all the topics that I need to know something about, and I'm showing you that I've gone through modules and I can demonstrate proficiency. And so I would say, if you're spending your time, spend your time first trying to get it so that they can see it in the test. So I would spend more of my time right now getting the GRE or getting the GMAT or getting the executive assessment right. But then as you're getting closer, and if you're around 3 person, though, for example, maybe you don't have time to do any more with the tests, and now you're like, okay, well, at least I can show them I'm in MBA math, and that's something. But if you have a little bit more time, spend more time trying to get the test up, and then also, show them that you're doing something else. Is a 700 easy to score? If it was easy to score, everybody would have it. I think it's like something like 10% of test takers. So no, it's not easy. However, GMAT Club is the place to be to work on it. So they have all kinds of webinars and videos and resources. So I encourage you to make full use of this platform. It's a great platform for GMAT help. So I think we're kind of near the end of the hour. So unless there's another quick question, I may stop sharing and wait for kind of my GMAT Club team to come in and tell me what's next. But I think we're nearing the end of the hour. I wish you all, the best. And I believe, each one of you has something special about you. And so do your best to uncover that and help, the schools see that side of you. Let them see who you are and what drives you. And, I, again, wish you all the best as you're applying. Okay, I'm going to stop sharing my presentation right now and hit end and go.